Welcome back. I'm Jason Willoughby with Reach the City Ministries, and we're going to delve into this delicate subject that everyone wants to think even more of, political engagement. I know, you're thinking, oh my goodness, must we go there? Well, actually, we're surrounded by politics in this culture. This is a culture consumed with power and imposing rules and being dominant and being in control. And so, like it or not, we're surrounded and being pulled from all sides into political engagement. So the big question is, how can we avoid doing this badly? Well, a lot of us do it badly. And that's the humility piece. Let's be honest to say, we've had a lot of bad arguments, counterproductive debates, bad attitudes, broken relationships. If you look behind you like a boat leaving a wake, if you see a lot of broken relationships about politics and no broken relationships or new relationships because of stepping up for Jesus Christ, the chances are good we have a problem. So let's look at, in this first clip, what one big problem that we're facing, that all of us are facing, is the issue of personal carnality. The Bible in Romans 7 and in Galatians 5 talk about a war of the spirit versus the flesh happening within us. I have found, as I have walked with Jesus over the last few decades, when I began my Christian life, there was a lot more teaching, more often, more depth about this issue of the flesh or carnality, or the sin nature kind of living. And so it's important to understand that we all carry inside of us a monster inside. It's something from the fall. And when Jesus came in and we were converted, he inserted his life, the Holy Spirit, and we became a new person, and he shunted to the side this old person we used to be, this sin connected thing, this entity within us, the monster within. It got dethroned and shoved to the side. It's still there, lurking, ready to pounce, but we have resources in the spirit to fight that inner battle. The problem is, we're not even talking about the battle. So let me just say, there's a problem we all have, and more of our self is not going to solve the problem of our self. Let's take a deeper dive. I believe every single Christian should memorize in Galatians 5 two things: the fruit of the Spirit, love, joy, peace, patience, kindness, goodness, gentleness, faithfulness, and self-control. Against those things there is no law. That's the spirit and attitudes and overflow of a life under the control of the Holy Spirit. There's this constellation of fruit, these character qualities, almost this unspoken something about us that speaks of God's peace, the love of the Lord, the peace of the Lord, the patience of the Lord, etc., etc. And that's something the Spirit produces when we're under his control. But when we're not under the Spirit's control and doing our own will in our own way, then there's this laundry list called the deeds of the flesh that is named. And these things, it's like quality control. I think I'm walking with God and walking in the power of the Spirit, but if those things are in my life, I'm deceiving myself, and I have a problem going on inside that needs urgently to be healed, corrected, and displaced before I begin to engage with other people. Just read this key passage. We've talked about the fruit of the Spirit. Let me talk a little bit more about this sin entity, this monster within the flesh. Paul says in Galatians 5:16, "But I say, walk by the Spirit, walk in the energy and power of the Spirit under his control, and you will not carry out the desires of the flesh." So there's the hopeful promise. Focus, be under the Spirit, the flesh is put on the side, you'll be living the life of the Lord. But there's a war. The flesh sets its desire against the Spirit, and the Spirit against the flesh. For these are in opposition to one another, so that you may not do the things that you please. In other words, we want to be a certain way, but because of this monster, this saboteur within us, we end up not doing the life of Christ we want to do. So we have this own thing within us that trips us up, that blocks it, that rises up against it. And we need the Holy Spirit to put that thing in its place so that we can not carry out the desires of the flesh. And Paul goes on to say the deeds of the flesh are evident, which are immorality, sexual immorality. That's a fail. If that's going on, that's flesh. Impurity, sensuality, idolatry, putting anything above Jesus and placing it beside him or above him, that's the flesh. Sorcery, using magic formulas to manipulate and control life. Boy, how often we practice magical thinking and magical formulas. Enmities, do you hate people? Do you hate groups? That's the flesh. Strife, are you a fighter? You're always arguing, you're always in conflict. Strife is the flesh. It's one of those qualities that gives it away. Jealousy, are you looking around and saying, it's not fair, they're getting more than me, I wish I could trade places, why can't I have that dissatisfied jealousy? That's the flesh. Outbursts of anger, are you just losing your temper and raging? That's the flesh. Disputes, dissensions, factions, are you getting into arguments, dividing into groups, causing, cutting groups in half, dividing? Factions, you're in this partisan group and you're against these other partisan groups. And then it goes on to envying, drunkenness, carousing, and things like these. It's not an exhaustive list. There's more to the flesh. So our sin nature, the monster within, leaves a telltale calling card when we're under its dominance and not walking with the Spirit. That's important. I find a great synonym for the sin nature to be wounded pride. That monster within me thinks it's always the victim, it's always cheated and full of grievances. It's hurting. It's a hurt monster. It's aggrieved, and it's egotistical. It's self-centered. So wounded pride, the wounded ego. If you have wounded personal pride, that's a telltale calling card of the flesh. Wounded family pride, wounded national pride, wounded racial pride, wounded cultural pride, wounded regional pride, etc., etc. My friends, we are choked full of all kinds of flavors of wounded pride. And whenever we live and speak and relate to other people out of that injured ego, that wounded monster within, we're not doing God's business, and we have no business engaging people outside the faith on disputed issues, and we're only going to get in trouble and we're going to damage the cause of Christ. So here's what you do. You disengage, you step back, and you let God through the Holy Spirit examine your heart for wounded pride, for where you're living out of that energy, deeds of the flesh, the wisdom from below, in James 4, and then you come to God honestly. You admit you're sorry. You admit you're in unbelief and pride, and you ask him to forgive you and cleanse you and renew a right spirit within you and bring you under the Holy Spirit's control and fill you with the Spirit and fill you full of the qualities of Christ that come as an overflow of being loved as sinners when we couldn't fix ourselves, and he loves us at the bottom. We're grateful, we're tenderized, we're wanting to be close to him, we're wanting to walk with him and do good for him, and that's the Holy Spirit kind of overflow life that we desperately need each of us to have if we're going to engage other people, especially on these most fought over subjects that are the hardest subjects to discuss: politics. See you next time for a whole nother level of carnality that gets in our way.